Santa Maria, from Santa Maria, California. Of course, if he was here in Fresno right now, he'd be cooking because it's like 104 degrees. George,
No
say
thanks.
hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. No thanks for cooking. It's hot over there.
So anyway, we're continuing our discussion about our friend, the telephone, and why it's so important. I mean, George, any idea how much money you spend on just getting people to call you?
Lots, lots and lots and lots between Facebook, Instagram, updating all the time that you do on Google, Yelp, all those other things, and then also just trying to get those reviews. How much effort does all that take for you to blow it by not having the proper way to answer the phone, greet them, and have a system in place to try to even answer it and try to win? And that's what you and I are talking about, is how do we win? How do we win this game of getting people in off the phone?
Well, what's interesting, George, it took me a while to figure it out, but and and how did you figure it out? Experience is never our best teacher. Evaluated experience is always your best teacher. And by the way, in any training, and George heard me say this many times, take the best and leave the rest. Okay,
Absolutely.
because not everything I'm going to say, you're going to agree with. But I will tell you this: I could work the phone, and
Yeah,
I know how to build rapport with people. I know how to make them feel special. I know how to make them like me and trust me. Because when people like you and trust you, they will do business with you. But a lot of people, they just wing it, and or they get frustrated. And listen, you can't get frustrated. Um, I'm learning new stuff all the time. And what I found out, George, is if I get frustrated, I shut down, and then I actually become counterproductive. You hear what I'm saying?
oh yeah, oh
So,
yeah.
and listen, you got to have proper sleep at night. You got to eat right, because if you're up all night worrying about how you're going to pay your rent, or how you're going to pay your power bill, or how you're going to pay this vendor or that vendor, it just makes the mountain bigger.
The hurdle, yeah, the stress, and people hear that stress through the phone.
Yeah, I can call places, and actually, when I go to facilities or I do telephone trainings, we call people, and I tell them exactly what's going to happen before it happens. Some people might hit one or two things of the process that I teach and I share with people, but that's usually the maximum. Then, of course, the people that I've worked with, they do pretty good, and every now and then I'll call them up and just say, "Hey," or I pretend like it's not me, and then if they blow it, then I just say this: "I know I taught you better than that." And then they're like, "Oh crap," it's Dell. And then when I run into them, or I talk to them again, he go, "Man, every time I get a phone call now, it makes me think that you're calling." Well, you know what? If I didn't care, I wouldn't call. Of course, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And
Absolutely.
and that's working the telephone. I mean, it's a tool. And George, anytime I've gotten new tools, it's taken me a while to get the hang of things. I mean, you're kind of unsure and stuff, and then of course I'll wear Google out. How do I do blah blah blah? Google, and in fact, I've been working with a PC. It's like, how do you copy and paste something? And I figured it out. Of course, I have an Apple computer, and I got it down. Well, pretty much. So George, what's on your mind, man? What's going on?
Well, I think a little bit more in review. If anybody who is tuning in this and you haven't watched our previous shows, watch them. You're going to learn a lot. Dell has taken me through a lot. And does he call my store? Yes. Does he bust my chops? You're not doing it. Because why? Because I think it's easier or spending the time. But you know what? I'm cutting myself short of making that sale. So through all these past couple of weeks making the phone calls, I'm getting more aggressive at it, and the Benjamins are coming.
You
So
know,
the calls are getting better, the consultations are getting better, getting more people in through the store. So there is a process. Um, a little bit on the review, I guess, Dell. These if you haven't tuned in our previous stuff, tune in because Dell's walked you through, part of the greeting. He's also kind of showed you how to ask for their name in a certain way. There's a formula he's got here that we're teaching. And then asking how they found out about you. And then, most of all, what kind of car are we putting this in? Okay,
so,
you're assuming that sale, right? It's what you teach.
well, and sometimes you'll get caught. And I used to get caught, and somebody said, "Well, I didn't say you were doing it yet." And in selling, a selling law, George, whenever you get in trouble, ask a question.
Ask another question, and that's where Dell is teaching you how to control the phone call. So when they start asking too many questions, can't you give me a price? Why can't you give me a price? You know, they'll give you every kind of excuse. That's where, hey, you know what? Can you hold on 1 second and put them on hold? Give them about 10 seconds, and then come back and greet them by their name. Hey, Dell, I'm back with you. I'm glad. Thanks for holding. And then you go into trying to ask them about a consultation. Hey, do you have in the power of two of a question? Listen, Dell, I have a time available this afternoon at 4 o'clock, or is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock better for you?
And you see, George, most people will ask, "When can you come in?" And see, it's so, it's
Um,
such
um,
exactly. And so what we want to do is we want to incorporate the selling law, which is called the power to. Never give them a choice between doing and not doing. Always give them a choice between doing it this way or doing it that way. And see, what you'll find out is, if you know what, George, can you come by to, what was it, 4, or is two tomorrow better for you? If they can't come by either one of those times, then they will tell you a time that they can come by. But if you just
Absolutely.
say, I mean, it's like magic, right, George?
Yep,
And
absolutely. They'll come back and tell you a time that they can be there. I can't make it at 2 o'clock, but I get off at 4. Can 4 work for you? Do you have a time available? You know what? 4 works best for me too.
well,
So,
another thing, I want to take you a little farther on that one, George. I'm going to tweak you a little bit, okay? Like,
all right.
in the car, it said, "Well, let me check my calendar because we're extremely busy because everybody seems to be calling on."
Window tint or what they're asking about.
Exactly. And then you go, "You know what, George, if you're for sure you could make it, I promise I'll squeeze you in. But by the way, George, if you get tied up, can you do me the courtesy of giving me a call and let me know you're running a little behind? And I'll tell you what, George, if I'm too busy, I'll do the same. Is that fair?"
Absolutely.
See, is
You're
that
building a rapport
fair?
with these people, and you're a lot. And how many places do you ever call that anybody ever cares that much about you and have a conversation like this? It doesn't happen. We're the specialists. We're the people that are the professionals. You want to be a professional? Train with a professional, and you're going to
Well,
win.
well, pros get paid, amateurs do not.
That's
Every
right.
time we hit every time we hit the no sell, they're going to go somewhere else and buy. If we don't answer the telephone 55% of the time, they're not going to call back, they're not going to leave a message, they're going to go somewhere else and buy. And unfortunately, in my area the pie was this big, right? And I wanted to take the biggest chunk out of that pie as possible because I knew if I wasn't good on the telephone and they went somewhere else, I'm feeding somebody else's family instead of feeding my own, or feeding my guys' families. You know,
Absolutely.
and so what we have to understand is that the phone, we spend all this money to get people to call, and yet we don't do anything to get better at it. I mean, we do these trainings to help people. That's why we do what we do. We want to see you rule and reign and dominate your market. See,
Absolutely.
I was able to do that. And in my area, we had 8 shops within 3 miles. George, if you called and I had to give you directions, right? I would make sure that those directions didn't drive you by another shop. You say,
Absolutely.
well, why is that? Well, because I used to have people come in all the time. Hey, I just got off the phone with you. And George, I didn't say, well, I didn't talk to anybody. I would say, hey, would you refresh we've been so busy. Can you refresh our memory what you were talking about? Oh, yeah, that's right. Hey, is your car here? And boom, I'm back out there. Somebody comes in your facility and go, hey, we saw your store, your store ad on television, and you're not running an ad. Don't tell them that you're not running an ad. Ask them what part of the ad motivated them to come by, and they'll tell you. And then you just take it from there. I mean, there's nothing like, how do I say this? There's nothing like, you know, cashing in on somebody else spending a lot of money to, bring people in. So,
Absolutely.
so, so George, I'd like to talk a little bit about a few of the selling laws so they grasp an idea of it. Number one, never give them a choice between doing and not doing. That's always two choices. Would you prefer this or that? Now, I could do a whole day, 8 hour, maybe 12 hours just on the power of two. And that's what I call it, the power of two, because it's so powerful. See, you want to load up your questions. So George, you mentioned, when you came back off hold, the question I would always ask, I always want to get as many yeses as possible. So I would say, George, are you still there?
Yes.
And we were talking about your 2019 black Honda Accord, is that right?
Yes.
And it's super hot inside. You wanted to get your windows treated, and we talked about your black paint also. Is that correct?
Yes.
And hey, by the way, George, how did you find out about us? It was one of our many 5-star reviews, or did a friend refer you to me?
It was those 5-star reviews.
Okay. So see, everybody, I loaded up that question. Was it a friend or was it the 5-star review? Now, let's say it was neither one. It doesn't matter to me because in their mind, I gave them two choices, many 5-star reviews, or was it a friend? See, word of mouth is still the best advertising there is, period. And see, I want to build a relationship with them, but I also want to find out. Now, George said it was a 5-star review. Well, George, on the 5-star review that you read, see, whoever asked the questions leads the conversation. See, I want to find out exactly why George called me. Okay. So back to the 5-star review, a lot of people go, oh, well, that's great. No, I'm going to dig deeper. And how I dig deeper is, George, which 5-star review did you read that inspired you to make this phone call?
Well, the one that said you're doing the window tint and it took you a little bit longer and you called me back you know and called the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever they say, you want to go into that conversation, go and keep on going down that review because that is something of their interest.
Right. So the communication was important to you. Is that right, George?
Right, because I'm always on the go.
That and the other thing was that the only review that you read, George, or was there others that you read?
No, I read some others.
Mm-hmm. And what other one popped out to you, George?
The one that the customer was pissed off and left a 1-star review, but you responded back, and I actually liked your explanation of about it. So
Mm-hmm.
I read and I see you're a legit business.
See, I love that guy. George, we get so many phone calls because people just like you understand that, hey, we're not going to please everybody, but our goal is to do so. By the way, George, I have some time later on today, or is tomorrow morning work for you to bring by your Accord? I mean, I'd love to see it. Which works better for you, either
What
later
what
on
time?
today or tomorrow morning?
What time today? Later today would work for you.
Well, I'm thinking around 4 or maybe 5. Which one works best for you?
I'm off at 5. Can I be there at like 5:15?
Sure, you can. Now, listen, we try and close at 6, man. You know, but you know what? Can we focus on that word "try"?
Yeah. So
See, I'm I got you laughing. I got you. You know. By the way, I used to have a saying. I don't know if I shared this with you, George. But when people would call, or when they'd show up, like right before we closed, this was my little poem that I made, and it went like this: Are you looking to look? Are you looking to spin? Because if you're looking to look, you got to come back again. And they would
yeah,
tell me we're looking to spin, and hey, I'd stay. But you know, I don't want to work overtime for for free. But anyway, so the gist of the thing, everybody, is I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to go deeper in those questions than most people will. And the other thing I do, George, is I write everything down. Now, when we first talked about your 2019 Black Honda Accord, that was probably about 3 weeks ago, or is that right?
yes,
And then before that, you had a 2004. Is that correct?
correct.
See, when somebody comes in, I'm going to summarize the whole phone conversation. Now, George, you called me on Thursday night. It was about 7:47 p.m. We talked about your Accord. We talked about your new one and your old one. And we talked about treating the windows, the paint protection. Of course, the remote start is a must, correct?
Yeah, it's so hot right now. What's it over there
Yeah,
in Fresno?
104.
Yeah, it's hot.
And I just bought one of those things to put on my dash. But I also have my windows treated. Of course, George did my window treatment on my windshield. And some of you out there that maybe you offer a window tint, I changed the name a long time ago to window treatment. And if you go, Dell, why'd you change the name? If you go online and look at window treatment, we're talking about custom drapes and stuff like that for somebody's home. And see, all things being equal, where will they go, George?
Yeah, the
The
cheapest
cheapest,
place.
the cheapest place. And so when people would call me and they say, you guys offer window tint, I go, well, actually, we offer what we call window treatment. Would you like to see the difference?
Yes,
Now, what? Repeat the question back to me, George.
we offer instead of offering just window tint, we offer window treatments. Would you like to see the difference
How are they going to see it?
in my store?
Exactly. See, that's what we want to do. We want to get them. We want to get them in. George, by the way, when you see the difference, you're not going to believe how much better what we have to offer than everybody else does. Of course, you can call around and get cheaper prices. But, George, let me ask you this. Have you ever driven around town and you see somebody with their back window that's purple and a bunch of bubbles?
Yep.
Would you give me $300 for something like that?
No.
How about two?
No.
How about 99 bucks and we'll do your whole car?
No way. That's cheap.
So, George, I don't believe in giving out prices, but I do believe in beating up my competition because I'm going to find out who the cheapest price in town and I'm going to walk them down that ladder. Would you give me three? Would you give me two? Would you give me 99? You see, and because if they call around and they get a price for $99, they're going to think purple with bubbles.
Right.
And so these are the things I think about, because I think, what am I going to say and how is it going to impact the person that's hearing what I have to say? Because there's no second chance to make a good first impression. And we want to think about what we say before we say. That way we can reflect on how it's going to how are they going to hear it? How are they going to perceive it? And I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I think about it all the time because I, personally, when I work with people, I want them to dominate their entire market. I mean, I have a bunch of people wrote me reviews and stuff like that, or testimonials. I mean, I love it. I eat it up. Yeah, I mean, they're my kids, and my kids are dominating, and I love it. I have, well, I won't get into the amount of some of my clients what they get for window treatments, but it's some of them are 4 digits. How in the world do they do that? They just I taught them how to do
Service.
it. Well, number
Yeah.
one, you have to think about this, George. Number one, if the price is big in your mind, it'll be big in your client's mind. Okay, so we got to think big. And no matter what price you give most people, George, they're going to have what I call sticker shock. So, if you start off with a lot, man, that much? Well, yeah. And I understand, George, if you don't have the money. However, if you do, and you plan on owning this car 15 years, like you said, wouldn't it be worth a few more dollars to get it done right now instead of getting it done the cheap way and then paying me to pull it off and then redo it? I mean, that'd be crazy, wouldn't it, George?
Yes.
See, the power of the yes, if you read How to Win Friends and Influence People, he talks about the power of the yes, but he doesn't share with you how to get the power of yes. And so with that, George, I'd like to do another demonstration with everybody, if that's possible. I'd like to teach what I got coming out real soon called the selling card game. Now, everybody, in the selling card game, I'm going to teach you how to build a yes momentum. I'm going to teach you how to use the power of two. By the way, a selling law is never argue or fight with your potential client. And my goal is, in the real world, I'm going to qualify them based on the information that I get from them. I'm going to lead them to that decision. So when I do the selling card game, uh, I already know I want you to think, gee, I just qualified George. George, make sure you're not peeking, okay? And I'm going to take George to this card right here. Oh, let's see. This screen kind of gets weird. But anyway, George, in a deck of cards, there's 52 cards, isn't there?
Yes.
So every time you get a yes in the game, you get $1 million Dell bucks. Handsome guy on that $1 million bill, isn't it? George, you were supposed
Yes.
to say yes.
I said yes.
So
No.
in that deck of cards, we have two different colors, don't we?
Yes.
And those two different colors would be
Red and black.
perfect. Now, another selling law is if you say it, they doubt it. If they say it, they believe it's true. All we got to do is get them to say it. Okay, so I use the power too sometimes to get them to say what I want them to say. So, George, can you choose one of these for me? One of these suits for me, please, George. Or colors, the red or the black, George?
Red.
Red, fantastic. Now, George, if we eliminate the red, what are we left with?
Black.
We are, aren't we?
Yes.
See, I never argue or fight. When he chose red, you notice I didn't argue with him, but I asked him if we take it away, what are we left with? And he said black. Now in the black suits, George, there's spades and there's clubs. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can you name one of those suits for me, please, George? Spades or clubs?
Spade.
Fantastic. Now we eliminate that. What are we left with, George?
Clubs.
You're batting 1,000, aren't you, George?
Yes.
Now, George, in the clubs, we're cards and number cards. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And can you name one of those groups for me, please, George? Face cards or number cards?
Numbers.
Fantastic. Now we have odd and even, don't we, George?
Yes.
Can you name one of those groups for me, please? Odd or even, George?
Even.
Even. Now, I'm going to eliminate the 10, so we'll have a 2-4 group and a 6-8 group. Can you name one of those groups for me, George? The 2-4 or the 6-8 of clubs?
6-8.
Fantastic. And between the 6 and the 8, can you name one of those for me, please?
8.
And if we eliminate the 8, what are you left with, George?
6.
The 6 of clubs, is that right?
That's correct.
And that's where I laid them to. You see, it's a learned process. And just like anything, Michael Jordan, he came to town as an exhibition game, and he was, showing off at the free throw line, and hopefully you don't feel I'm showing off. But without even looking at the rim with his right hand, he hit 10 in a row. And then he went to his left hand and not looking at the rim, and he hit 10 in a row. George, how do you think he got that good?
Practice, 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 and practice. 3
Right,
times
and
a day.
you got to understand, practice doesn't make perfect, George. Perfect practice makes perfect. And you see, I've practiced this a long time. George, what's interesting is I have, and maybe a lot of the viewers out there, I have cassette tapes that I started listening to when I was 15 years old. And I
What's a
even have
cassette?
it. Exactly. I even have a cassette player. A cassette came after 8 tracks. Of course, before 8 tracks, there was 4 tracks. But see this gray hair, it's, I didn't dye it this color.
Wisdom.
So George, if you were going to give anybody some tips tonight, what would those tips be?
Go back and listen to our previous episodes that we have, and listen to them, and keep on listening to them, keep on listening, and take them by sections and learn from them. Learn when Benjamin's calling, how to pick up your voice. Feel that excitement, because people hear that,
Well,
and then keep
go ahead, George. I apologize.
all the stuff that we've been practicing, and then you're going to switch yourself to becoming a professional. And what's going to happen is your phone calls may become a little bit longer, but now you're building the Benjamins coming in the door. More and more.
George, I never really spent more than 3 or 4 minutes on the telephone.
Just asking the questions.
First of all, I'm going to build rapport. And, when I start talking about their car and excited, man, a black Honda Accord, man, those babies, when they're washed, they're gorgeous, aren't they, George?
Yes.
And
get into yeses, right?
You shared with me you wanted to keep it for 15 years. Is that right?
I did.
There's another $1 million bucks. And last time, your 2000, you had a 2004 before you had the 19. Is that right?
Yes.
And it was white, wasn't it?
Yes.
See, it's the same principle, but I use it, a different way, because it doesn't matter what they have. You see, if you don't get excited and sound interested about what they have, why should they get excited or interested about what you have? Right. Anyway, George, we got about a minute and 15, 16 seconds. I just want to say how much I appreciate you, George. I appreciate those that are viewing. And if anybody, if you need help, just go to DEL, like the computer, but 1L, DEL, help us at gmail.com. Email me. If you have any questions, go, man, live, I wish you guys would cover this. If you email me, I'll put it on. I'm not afraid. I'm not shy, because I understand the selling laws. Number one, if I get in trouble, I'm going to ask a question. Number two, whoever asks the questions leads the conversation. Number three, I'm never giving them a choice between doing and not doing. I'm always going to give them a choice between doing it this way or doing it that way. Number four, I'm going to build as much yes momentum as possible, because once they start saying yes, it makes it difficult for them to say no. Anyway, George, I want to thank you. I appreciate you so much. I'm so proud of you, man. I just see tremendous growth in you. And I just want to thank you. And I want to thank all those who are viewing. And if you go YouTube, subscribe. I don't know how to do the subscribe button yet, but I think you can do it. or on Facebook. Just go to Del Ellis International. It's underneath my name, and start following me. By the way, if you want to win a free one-on-one, just share this message with someone else. If you tag them on it, if you email me your information, listen, I'm not going to call you. I don't have time to call you. And now, if I train you, I'll call you. Right, George?
Yes, you do. Those phone calls. That's not how I
there's
told
a
you to answer the phone.
there's another $1 million Dell bucks. Anyway, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you the same bat time, the same bat channel next week. Be blessed.